He had everything: power, wealth, an empire built on sweat and control. But on an ordinary morning, something he never imagined happened. The gaze of a simple cleaning lady would shake his entire reality. Not because of her job, but because of who she was. And he wasn't ready for that. Jiang Wei looked out the panoramic window of his office, watching the frantic movement below. The city seemed so distant when seen from the top of the world. The feeling of control he experienced every day made his position as CEO of one of the largest companies in the world seem unbeatable. All the employees saw him as the embodiment of success. He commanded, decided, dictated the rules. But today, there was something different in the air. Maria, the newly hired cleaning lady, entered the office silently. Her footsteps echoed through the cold room, reverberating in an environment where luxury and power blended with the solidity of metalwork and glass. With a simple uniform and hair tied in a bun, she didn't seem to belong to the life of that environment. She was just a woman among the shadows, invisible to many but not to him. Jiang Wei watched her discreetly, not because she was special, but because of the indifference she carried. While other employees usually tried hard to please him, she didn't seem even a little impressed by his presence. She moved with a disconcerting serenity, as if she were a natural part of that environment without, however, being subdued by it. The clock on the wall marked the time, and the murmur of computers, and distant conversations was the only music to his ears. He moved away from the window, went to his black marble desk and sat down. He began to review some documents, but something distracted him. The soft sound of brooms on the floor, the movement of Maria cleaning every corner with precision, the way she seemed to know exactly where every stain was, every bit of dirt that time had left behind. She approached him without saying a word, cleaning the glass of the desk. He watched her for a moment, his eyes focused on the smooth movement of her hands. He was used to being the centre of attention, but she was different. He felt a discomfort he wasn't used to facing. "Good morning, sir." Her voice was low, almost as if she were apologizing for existing in that space. Jiang Wei looked up, observing the woman closely for the first time. What he saw was not just an ordinary cleaning lady. What he saw was someone who didn't fear his presence, someone who seemed not to need him. The tension he generated in people didn't touch her. There was no flattery in her eyes, only an unshakable calm. He had never imagined that his own image of power could be so easily challenged by a woman who had nothing, but carried everything he did not possess: tranquility and dignity. He took a deep breath, trying to pull himself together. "You're new here, right?" he asked, his voice emotionless. He was more interested in her than he cared to admit. Maria looked at him with a discreet smile, without a touch of fear or insecurity. "Yes, sir. Just starting today." The answer was simple, but her gaze remained firm, without shifting to Jiang's eyes, as if she had already seen everything she needed in that environment. He couldn't help but wonder why she wasn't impressed with him, why she didn't feel the need to please him like everyone else did. That bothered him. "You've got a big job ahead." He tried to divert from his own thoughts, pointing to the rest of the office, hoping she would follow his suggestion without question. She just nodded and continued her task. And for a moment, Jiang Wei felt alone. Not because he was, but because suddenly he felt that something was missing in his life. When she finished the work and was preparing to leave, he called her again. "Maria," he said, not knowing exactly what he wanted to say. She stopped and slowly turned around. "Do you have any previous experience in companies like this?" Maria looked at him, surprise briefly crossing her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. "I've worked in other Places. They're not companies like this one, but every place has its own challenges. Jiang Wei frowned. Her tone, the calm with which she spoke, stirred something inside him. He didn't know what exactly, but there was something there he wanted to understand. She leaned slightly, almost as if wanting to apologize for taking up his time. "Excuse me, sir. I need to finish my work." Jiang watched her walk away, his mind full of questions and unrest. Maria didn't see him as a god, like the others did. She saw him as he truly was, a man in search of something, but not knowing exactly what. And there, in the luxurious room, overlooking the entire city, something had changed for Jiang Wei. Maria's presence, unknowingly, had planted a seed. He didn't know what it meant yet, but one thing he knew for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Jiang Wei couldn't stop thinking about Maria. For the rest of that day, while his team of managers surrounded him, discussing strategies and numbers, he found himself staring out the window, not hearing the words being spoken around him. His mind was elsewhere, not on his million-dollar negotiations, nor on the expansion of his company, but on the image of Maria. She, the cleaning lady, with her indifferent gaze and the serene way she moved through the office. He had never imagined that someone like her could affect him so deeply. At first he tried to ignore it, convinced that he shouldn't care about a mere employee. But as the days went by, the thought of her became more and more persistent. It was something he couldn't understand, a growing unease, and that feeling of being unsettled by someone who had no intention of pleasing him or submitting to him made him irritated. He didn't like it. Maria, for her part, felt the difference between their worlds. When she started working at that company, she knew she would be just another invisible employee, meant to clean the spaces others used. However, when she looked at Jiang Wei, she felt a tension she couldn't quite define. It wasn't just the power he represented, but the fact that he looked at her as if she were merely a cog in the machinery of his company. She could feel that he saw her, but didn't understand her. In the following days, their encounters became more frequent. With each visit to the office, Maria and Jiang Wei exchanged a few words, a casual comment here, a glance there. He found himself increasingly curious about her, but also more uncomfortable with his own curiosity. He was used to having people around him try to please him, to understand his desires. But Maria seemed completely immune to that. She didn't need him, and he didn't know how to deal with that. She showed no fear, no admiration. Her posture was firm, her voice calm and without affectation. To Jiang, this was a clear sign that she was beyond his control, and that left him unsettled. His entire life had been based on dominance, on absolute leadership, but now he was faced with someone who simply didn't care about his status. She was there to do her job, nothing more. In one of their encounters, as Maria cleaned a shelf beside his desk, Jiang Wei decided to try a more direct approach. "Maria," he said, looking at her as she worked, "don't you feel uncomfortable working here? I mean, with all these skyscrapers and business people around you?" Maria didn't look at him right away. She was focused on her work, but her voice, calm and unhurried, replied without even glancing at the shelf she was wiping. "Uncomfortable? No, sir. It's just work. Every place has its energy. Mine is here now." Jiang Wei felt an immediate discomfort at the simplicity of her answer. How could she be so indifferent? He wasn't used to this. People usually tried to adapt to him, tried to please him, tried to find meaning in his presence. But Maria seemed to be there for an entirely different reason, just to do her job and then leave. The conversation, which he imagined would be an attempt to get closer to Maria, didn't have the desired effect. In fact, he felt more distant from her. There was something in her demeanour that seemed to challenge him in a silent but powerful way. Jiang Wei never liked feeling challenged. It bothered him more than any business obstacle. Maria, on the other hand, wasn't concerned with the power dynamics at play. To her, Jiang Wei was just another rich man who, like others, was trapped in his own insecurities. She had known that from the moment she first saw him. She wasn't intimidated by his social position. Her job at the company didn't change the fact that her life outside of it was completely different. The power he radiated had no effect on her, and that made her feel stronger. In fact, she felt a kind of compassion for him. She saw in Jiang Wei's eyes the same loneliness she had once felt in her own life. He was trapped in a golden cage he had built himself, but couldn't escape. While he watched the world from above, she knew he was more lost than anyone. But Maria wasn't there to save anyone. She had her own life to take care of, her own dreams, and no time to get involved in the dilemmas of a millionaire CEO. She had already fought hard to get where she was, and no one, not even him, was going to make her forget that. The distance between the two began to grow. Each time Jiang Wei tried to get closer, be it with a question or a comment about her work, she pulled away, not physically, but emotionally. She knew he wanted something from her, but what he didn't understand was that she wasn't willing to submit to his will. Maria didn't need his approval. She was there because she needed a job, not because she wanted to be part of his world. In the following days, the tension between the two continued to grow. Jiang Wei couldn't understand why Maria challenged him without doing anything explicit. He began to notice that she was increasingly focused on her work, and he, in his frustration, couldn't look away. She, however, seemed immune to him, and that only increased his discomfort. The loneliness he carried began to weigh heavier as he found himself powerless before the woman who did not fear his power. Jiang Wei didn't know how, but he was obsessed with Maria. It wasn't the kind of obsession he was used to, like with his business ventures or his pursuit of wealth and power. It was something more unsettling, something that challenged his understanding of himself. Each passing day, he found himself more distracted. He tried to focus on meetings, reports, and company decisions, but the thought of Maria always lingered. It was becoming harder for him to see her as just a cleaning lady. He knew there was more to Maria than the woman who cleaned the floors of his company. There was something about her that bothered him, in both a good and bad way. The calmness in her movements, the way she did her job without seeking approval or recognition, it all made him feel small and insignificant. It was on a cold Thursday afternoon that he saw her differently. The office was quieter than usual, with most executives attending an important meeting. Jiang Wei, alone in his office, stared out the window once again, lost in thought. The soft sound of a broom in the background made him turn, and there she was, Maria, as always, in her simple uniform, cleaning surfaces with the care of someone who knows the value of every small detail. He didn't know what made him rise from his chair. Maybe it was growing curiosity, or maybe it was something deeper, something he didn't want to admit. He walked toward her, not in a rush, but with a clear purpose. Maria didn't notice his approach until he was right beside her. "Maria," he said, his voice softer than usual. She looked at him, eyes calm and attentive. "Yes, sir." There was something different in her demeanour. She didn't look at him with fear, nor with indifference, just with a calmness that felt disarming to Jiang Wei. He, who was used to being looked at with admiration, or at least with caution, felt something he'd never experienced before: vulnerability. Not a vulnerability related to his image or position, but something more subtle, something that shook him internally. I've been thinking about what you said the other day." Jiang Wei hesitated, searching for the right words. "You said you didn't feel uncomfortable here, but it's hard for me to understand that." Maria finished wiping down the counter and looked at him, in no rush to respond. She knew he was expecting something deeper, but she wasn't there to provide easy answers. "I'm not from here, sir. I don't have the luxury of feeling uncomfortable. This is my job, and I do the best I can. What matters is doing it well." The simplicity of her words made him feel even more distant from his own reality. How could someone who had everything understand the true essence of someone who had to fight for every penny, every opportunity? He didn't know. But he felt the need to understand more, to discover something beyond the facade of his millionaire life. "Have you ever—" He paused, thoughtful. "Ever felt like you didn't belong, like the world wasn't made for you?" Maria looked at him, her gaze steady, but without the discomfort he expected. "I know where I belong, sir. The world doesn't need to be made for me. I've understood my place in it." She paused briefly. "What you don't understand is that things aren't that complicated. I'm just doing what I need to do to survive." Jiang Wei felt a bit unsettled by her frankness. It was as if she were telling him that her life was much simpler, but in a way he couldn't quite grasp. "But don't you want more than this? Don't you dream of something bigger? Something beyond being a cleaning lady?" Maria took a deep breath, as if she had been expecting that question. She knew he was trying to understand her reality in a way that was difficult for him. She knew that to him, her life must have seemed limited and lacking ambition, but she had a different perspective. "I did dream, sir," she said calmly. "I dreamed when I was younger. I dreamed of a different life. A life with more choices, more opportunities. But life taught me that sometimes what we want isn't what the world offers, and what you do with that. That's what really matters." Jiang Wei watched her in silence, trying to process her words. She didn't have the easy answers he was used to hearing. She didn't have the life he imagined she would. But there was something about her, something in her way of living, that made him question his own choices, his own values. "And what do you do now?" he asked, more out of impulse than real curiosity. "Do you still dream, or are you content with what you have?" Maria looked at him for a moment, her expression serene but with a softness in her eyes. "Now, I just live. And if I find something that makes me dream again, I'll follow it. But for now, my dream is to take care of my daughter. And that's enough." Jiang Wei remained silent. He didn't know how to respond. Her words stayed with him longer than he cared to admit. There was something in Maria's sincerity that completely disarmed him. She didn't want anything from him. She didn't want his help, his power, or his approval. She simply existed, and that made her stronger than any of his business deals or ambitions could ever be. As she walked away to continue her work, Jiang Wei stood there, lost in his own thoughts. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have the answers. And somehow that left him more unsettled than any negotiation he had ever faced. With each passing day, Maria's presence in the office seemed increasingly unsettling to Jiang Wei. Not because he saw her as a threat, but because her indifference destabilized him. He didn't know what to do with the growing frustration of facing someone who didn't treat him with the reverence he was used to receiving. He, who had always been surrounded by people who bowed to his power, now found himself facing a woman who, without even trying, made him question everything he thought he knew about control and superiority. Maria, on her end, felt the pressure of her position. Although she made a point of staying focused on her work and not getting involved in the dilemmas of the rich and powerful, there was something about Jiang Wei that made her think more than necessary. She knew he was trying to understand something about her life, something he would probably never be able to grasp. But the truth was, she didn't really know what he wanted from her either. Sometimes it seemed like he didn't even know what he wanted himself, and that confused her. In the days that followed, their encounters became more frequent. He sought her out for brief conversations, always trying to learn more about her, as if she were a puzzle to be solved. But to Maria, he was nothing more than a lost man, so deeply immersed in his life of luxury that he couldn't see the simple, genuine things. "Maria," he began one afternoon as she cleaned the window of his office, "have you never thought of leaving this job and trying something bigger? Working at a different company, something that pays more, or even starting something of your own?" She looked at him, surprised by the question. It wasn't the first time he asked about her ambitions, but it was the first time he seemed genuinely interested. She leaned slightly to one side to clean a harder-to-reach corner and answered calmly, "I've thought about it, sir. We all have. But life doesn't work the way we imagine. I have responsibilities, and that's more than enough for me. I'm not trying to change the world, I'm just trying to live in mine." Jiang Wei remained silent, watching her as she finished what she was doing. He couldn't fully understand, but there was something in her words that moved him. He had always believed that success and power came from always wanting more, from fighting relentlessly for what you desired. But Maria didn't seem to want any of that. She seemed content in her simplicity. The frustration he felt began to blend with a strange sensation, something he wasn't used to experiencing. He watched her work as if every movement she made was a lesson he didn't know how to learn. She didn't worry about the future or about what could have been. She simply lived in the present, something he had never known how to do. "Isn't it sad?" he asked without thinking. "To not want more than this? One day you might look back and regret not having tried something different." Maria raised her eyes to him, and for the first time in days, she gave him a subtle smile. It wasn't a mocking or pitying smile, but something genuine, as if she were trying to share a truth he hadn't yet understood. "I don't have regrets, sir. Life has taught me to be grateful for the simple things. I know what it's like to struggle, and I know what it's like to win. But in the end, what really matters is being at peace with who you are. That's what makes me happy." Jiang Wei looked at her, his expression hard to read. He wanted to challenge her words, to prove she was wrong, that there was more to life than this apparent acceptance of mediocrity. But something in his heart held him back. Maybe it was her sincerity, or maybe it was the fact that he had begun to question his own insatiable pursuit of more power, more control. He knew Maria's life was hard, yet she didn't let it crush her. That somehow made him feel small. She didn't need the wealth he had. She didn't need the power he possessed. And in some way, that made her stronger than he would ever be. In the days that followed, the tension between them continued to grow, but in a quiet, unspoken way. Jiang Wei began to wonder if what he was truly seeking in Maria was a life lesson he had never had the courage to learn. He felt there was more to her than he could perceive, something that allowed her to maintain her dignity and strength without submitting to his world. Maria, in turn, began to see Jiang Wei differently. She realized that behind all his facade of wealth and power, he was just a man trying to find something he couldn't even define. She sometimes watched him with a look of compassion, and part of her felt sorry for him. He was lost in his relentless pursuit of control and success, and it was consuming him. Still, Maria didn't let herself be drawn in by his vulnerability. She knew what it meant to live without relying on anyone, and that made her immune to the power games Jiang Wei tried to play. She had something he would never have: inner peace. The serenity of someone who knows that, even without the world at her feet, she is still enough. Jiang Wei had spent the last few days re-evaluating everything he believed to be true. His company was doing well, The finances were more than secure, and his image as a powerful, unbeatable man was stronger than ever. But something inside him was breaking, something he could no longer ignore. And as the days passed, he knew that this feeling came from Maria. It was a paradox. She had nothing he wanted, no wealth, no power, no influence, but at the same time she possessed something he desperately wanted to understand, a peace he had never experienced. She didn't need him. She didn't care about his power, his position, or his fortune. She was simply there, living her life with a kind of dignity he knew he didn't have. The conversation from a few days ago, when Maria spoke about the simplicity of life, echoed in his mind like a distant memory. He tried to push the thought away, focusing on the responsibilities his position demanded, on the pressure of maintaining his business empire. But every time he thought of her, the weight of his own loneliness grew heavier. It was on a grey Friday morning, the sky heavy with clouds and a light rain falling outside, that the tension between them reached a breaking point. Jiang Wei was in his office once again alone when he heard Maria's footsteps approaching. She had started cleaning the common areas as usual. He sat at his desk, staring at a pile of reports, but her presence, as always, pulled his attention away. He could no longer pretend he felt nothing. Something inside him needed to be said. He called her. Maria. She looked at him, her face, as unreadable as ever, but with a slight curiosity in her eyes. Yes, sir. I need to talk to you about something, he said, his tone deeper than usual. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to say, but he knew he needed some kind of answer, some truth, something to free him from the restlessness he felt. Maria watched him, calm as always. She knew he was struggling with something, but she didn't know what. Of course, sir. What would you like to talk about? Jiang Wei hesitated for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. That moment of vulnerability, however small, was something he wasn't used to. He didn't know how to start the conversation without seeming weak, but he knew that somehow she was the key to all of it. You've made me think about many things, Maria. More than I'd like to admit, he began, his voice lower now. You talked about living in the present, about not regretting the choices you've made. I don't know how to do that. Maria didn't respond right away. She was attentive, but didn't rush the conversation. She sensed he was trying to find a way to open up, but she didn't want to force anything. Life had taught her to wait for the right moment. I've always been obsessed with the future, he continued. Always chasing more, always fighting for more. The empire I built, the wealth, the status, all of it has been a relentless pursuit of power and control. But when I stand in front of you, I realize that in the end, all of it feels empty. Jiang Wei's confession hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Maria, who had always observed the people around her, now saw him in a different light. She didn't pity him, but felt a kind of compassion she rarely allowed herself to feel. He was beginning to understand, perhaps for the first time, what she had always known, that power doesn't bring happiness, only a prison of expectations. I always thought that if I had everything I wanted, I'd be happy, he said, his eyes searching hers. But now I see that the more I have, the emptier I feel. What I truly want isn't in any of these things, and that scares me. Maria stepped a little closer, still carrying the calm that defined her. She didn't know exactly how to help him, but she knew he was on the right path. She took a step forward, as if to break the invisible barrier that still existed between them. I understand what you're saying, sir, she replied softly. But I don't know if you really understand what it is that you want. Sometimes The search for something more only pulls you away from what's already right in front of you. What you're looking for isn't in more wealth, in more power. It's within you, in finding peace with who you truly are. Jiang Wei looked at her, eyes filled with doubt and a new kind of understanding. He didn't know if he was ready to fully accept what she was saying, but there was something in her words that made more sense than anything he had ever heard before. "And you, Maria?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Have you never wanted more? Never wanted something different?" Maria smiled, but it was a calm smile, without bitterness, without any need to impress him. "I've wanted more before, sir, and maybe I still do. But what I've realized is that happiness doesn't come from chasing things others think you should want. It comes from living with what you have and learning to value the simple things." He felt a strange sensation, a mixture of frustration and relief. He wanted more. He wanted something deeper, something more meaningful. But at the same time, Maria's sincerity made him question whether everything he'd pursued so far had really been worth it. Jiang Wei didn't know what to do with these new feelings. He wasn't used to feeling this way, vulnerable, lost. But for the first time, he felt the answer might not lie in more wealth, nor in more power. The answer might lie in something he had never considered before. Acceptance. Maria, without waiting, for more words, stepped away to continue her work. But before leaving the room, she looked back at him one last time and said in her gentle voice, "If you truly want to change, sir, maybe it's time to stop looking outside yourself. What you're looking for might already be inside you." Jiang Wei watched her walk away, and for the first time he felt no anger or resistance. He felt a strange peace, a peace he had never known before, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe Maria was right. The rain fell heavily over the city, casting a silvery glow on the streets under the lamplight. The weather, as if it sensed the emotional storm unfolding within Jiang Wei, seemed to reflect his state of mind. He was sitting alone in his office, once again staring out the window. But this time, it wasn't the city that held his attention. It was the whirlwind of thoughts consuming him. Maria had said something that struck him deeply. What you're searching for might already be inside you. He couldn't get those words out of his head. As much as he tried to return to business, reports, strategy, he couldn't escape the growing emptiness within him. He had everything a person could want: wealth, status, power. Yet he was losing something essential, a connection to what truly mattered. That night, after work hours, Jiang Wei decided to leave the office early. The solitude within the luxurious yet hollow building had become unbearable. He needed something more real, something that could help him understand this unsettling feeling taking over. He decided to visit the old neighborhood where he had grown up, a place he rarely remembered, yet had always been part of his story. His past. Far from skyscrapers and extravagance, the neighborhood was modest and simple, a world away from the grandeur that now defined his life. When he arrived, the familiarity hit him like a wave. The smell of food from the street vendors, the voices calling out their wares, the distant sound of children playing. It all stood in sharp contrast to the luxury he now possessed. He walked through the narrow streets, taking in the simple houses and the people who still lived there, many of whom he had known in childhood. But that wasn't what drew him. It was the weight of nostalgia, the time he had left behind. He stopped, in front of his family's old house. The facade was worn, but he still recognized every detail. He remembered the simple days of his youth, before life had forced him to grow up too fast. His mother, who worked tirelessly. His father, always absent, but who on rare occasions gave him advice on how to conquer the world. No tears fell, but the pain was real. The emptiness he now felt wasn't just about Maria's absence. It was the emptiness of a man who had climbed to the top without realizing the price he would pay. What had he lost along the way? What had he left behind? "Why are you here, Jiang Wei?" The voice made him turn quickly. It was the woman he feared facing the most, his mother. She stood at the door, looking at him with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. I needed to see this again," he replied, trying to hide the confusion in his voice. She watched him for a moment, saying nothing. It was as if she were weighing him, measuring every word before deciding to speak. The truth was, she had never approved of the path he chose, this relentless pursuit of wealth and power. "You forgot where you came from, didn't you, Jiang Wei?" she finally said, her voice slicing through the night's silence. "You forgot our life, the sacrifices we made so you could have everything you have now, but in the end you're not here anymore. You're not with us. You're with your empire of loneliness." Her words hit him with a force he didn't expect. He didn't want to admit it, but she was right. He had distanced himself from everything and everyone in pursuit of something that, deep down, could never fill the emptiness inside him. What he had built, what he believed to be the pinnacle of success, was actually a gilded prison. "I was never happy, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I conquered the world, but I lost myself." She watched him in silence, as if she understood the pain he was trying to hide. "And what are you going to do with that, my son? Will you keep chasing more? Keep getting more lost in everything you've built?" Jiang Wei felt the weight of her words in his soul. There was no going back. He knew he was at a crossroads. The life he had chosen hadn't made him happy. He had abandoned everything that truly mattered to him. "I don't know what to do, Mum. I don't know how to go back to what I lost," he admitted, the pain now visible on his face. She took a step forward and looked at him with a mix of sadness and understanding. "Sometimes, my son, to find what you've lost, you need to retrace your steps. Go back to who you really are, not to who the world tells you to be." Jiang Wei closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the intensity of her words. He didn't know how to find his way back, but something inside him told him that what he was looking for wasn't at the top of his empire. It was within him, in the choices he had made, and those he still had the power to make. As he walked back to the car, the rain was still falling, but now it didn't feel so cold. Something had shifted inside him. For the first time he felt a faint sense of relief. He didn't know how, but he was beginning to understand that he didn't need more power or more riches. Maybe what he truly needed was something he already had, something that Maria, in her quiet way, had helped him see, that true peace comes from within. The following days were marked by a different kind of restlessness in Jiang Wei. He didn't quite understand what was happening to him, but the changes were tangible. The city before him still looked the same, the tall buildings, the constant hum of life outside. But to him, everything now felt a little more distant, as if somehow his vision had become clearer. The decisions he once made automatically were now being evaluated with an intensity he had never experienced before. He allowed himself to breathe differently, as if he had finally set down the weight of the world, if only for a moment. But it wasn't an escape. It was no longer the urge to run away. He wanted to find something new, something that brought him fulfillment, but most of all, something that connected him to the world in a more genuine way. And strangely, the key to that was Maria. After so many days of questioning his own life, he felt he needed to search for a deeper answer to who he really was. He began working more closely with his employees, drawing near to people he once viewed as cogs in the system, but now was beginning to see as human beings, with their own stories, dreams, and struggles. He interacted more with those he had previously seen as beneath him. Every conversation was a small opening that helped him understand the simplicity Maria had always spoken of. Jiang Wei felt the change was happening, but it was still difficult to fully step away from the old mindset that had defined him for so long. In his office he tried to focus, but he thought of her. He thought about what she now represented to him, the peace she radiated, the freedom she seemed to have to live her life without the pressure of always wanting more. It was on one of those days while reviewing some business proposals that he finally decided to go to her, not to ask a question about her work or how she could be more efficient, but because he wanted somehow to talk to her about everything he was going through. He knew she had something to teach him, something he had not yet fully understood. He found her in the break room, just before she left for her daily cleaning rounds. Maria was drinking a coffee, as usual, sitting in the corner of the room. When he walked in, she didn't stand or make any movement to draw attention. She simply looked at him, as if she had known he would come to her eventually. "Maria," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need to talk to you." She lifted her gaze, not surprised but curious. "Of course, sir. About what?" Jiang Wei sat down across from her, still a bit unsure but with something genuine in his eyes. He didn't know what to expect from the conversation, but something inside was pushing him to speak. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about what really matters, about how maybe I've lost sight of the most important things in life. I don't know how to explain it, but something has changed in me. I can't keep living the same way. Power, wealth, negotiations, it's all just a distraction." Maria watched him attentively, without rushing to respond, without pressing him to say more. She knew he was wrestling with himself, and in a way, it made her see Jiang Wei as more human. She knew he didn't need ready-made advice. What he truly needed was a patient listener, someone who would allow him to process his own journey. "I don't know what comes next," he continued. "I don't know how to change completely, but I know I need something different. I need to understand what true peace is." Maria looked at him for a moment, as if weighing his words. She knew he was in the process of transformation, but it was still too soon to say he had truly changed. The path back to true freedom, to true inner peace, was long and demanding. "You won't find it in work or in the empire you've built, sir," she said calmly. "You'll find it in the simple things, in what is genuine and real. True peace comes from within you, not from what you possess. And no matter how much you try, you'll never feel complete until you allow yourself to be honest with who you really are." Jiang Wei felt the weight of her words. He knew she was right. He was tired of searching for peace in external things, in achievements that never truly fulfilled him. He needed to reconnect with who he really was, with what made him feel alive, in a way that money and power never could. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, "but I want to try. I want to discover what really matters, truly matters. I don't know if I'll succeed, but for some reason I feel I need to start now." Maria gave him a gentle smile, as if she already knew he was on the right path. "You've already taken the first step. What matters now is that you keep walking, patiently. And remember, sir, it's not about having everything. It's about learning to live with what you have and being grateful for it." Jiang Wei sat silently for a moment, letting her words sink in. Something inside him was changing, not just in terms of what he wanted for his life, but in how he understood others and the world around him. Little by little, he began to realize that what he truly needed wasn't to conquer the world, but to reconnect with it. And perhaps somewhere along that path, he might discover a way to be truly happy. Jiang Wei felt lighter, but with every step he took toward change, the shadow of his past seemed to follow him, never ceasing to mark his path. The decision to try and start over wasn't easy, and he knew nothing would be resolved immediately. There were moments, like last night, when he questioned whether he was really on the right path, or if the pain of letting go of old certainties was pushing him toward a road that felt too uncertain. The company kept growing, and decisions still had to be made quickly and efficiently. But now, something else had become more important to him: the balance between his corporate world and his search for authenticity. How could he continue fulfilling his responsibilities as CEO and at the same time pursue something more genuine, less hollow? How could he maintain his position of power without losing his connection with people? The days went by in constant motion between these two worlds, the empire he had built and his desire to find meaning. It was then that he decided the only way to begin understanding his own transformation was to revisit the past, the one he had tried to bury beneath layers of wealth and success. On a cold Friday afternoon, he made an unexpected visit to his mother's house. It wasn't a business call, nor a meeting to solve anything company-related. It was personal. He knew he needed to look back, not to blame himself, but to finally make peace with it. He couldn't move forward without first understanding what had brought him there. Upon arriving at the house, he was greeted by his mother's usual cautious expression, but this time she seemed a little softer. Perhaps deep down she already knew he was trying to reconnect with something he had lost. The old house was a bit more worn down, but it still had the same scent, the same warm atmosphere he remembered. To him, his childhood home had always been a place of contrasts. It was simple, yet full of memories, and everything in it felt like a reminder of what he had truly left behind in his pursuit of success. "I didn't expect to see you here, son," his mother said with a slight smile, but also a tired look. "What brings you here? You already have everything you could want." Jiang Wei let out a deep sigh. "I don't know what to expect anymore, Mom. I'm trying to understand what really matters, trying to see beyond what wealth and power can offer me. I want to understand what I lost, and if there's something I can do to change that." His mother watched him for a moment, weighing his words. She knew he was on an inner journey, but also how far he had drifted from what truly mattered over the years. "You've had it all, son, but sometimes everything you need is already right in front of you. The problem is, when you're always chasing something more, you never notice what you really have. You spent so much time getting lost in the big, important things that you forgot the little ones that truly make life worth living: love, family, the simple moments of joy." Her words hit him deep. He felt a soft ache in his chest. After all, it was the truth. He had been chasing happiness in things he possessed, not in what he had left behind. He had distanced himself from his mother, from his roots, from everything that represented who he truly was. "I don't know how to go back, Mum. I don't know how to undo everything I've done. I created a world where no one understands what I really need." His mother stepped closer and embraced him. "You were never alone, son. The problem isn't what you've lost, but what you still have yet to find. If you search with your heart, you'll find what you need. But above all, remember this: the greatest success of all is to be true to yourself." Her words stayed with him for days. Jiang Wei knew the answer wasn't to go back, but to move forward with a new perspective. He couldn't undo what had been done, but from that moment on, he could build something more honest, more real. The next morning, he returned to his office with a sense of renewal. When he entered the room, the team was discussing strategies for a new international expansion project, but something in him had shifted. He no longer wanted just to expand. conquer more territories, or increase the company's wealth. He wanted to do things differently. He wanted his company to be more than just a profit-making machine. He wanted it to reflect his new vision. "Everyone," he began, interrupting the discussion. All eyes turned to him, surprised by the interruption. "I'm not going to continue just chasing profits. We need to think about the impact we have on the world. We need a vision that involves people, that makes sense to them, not just to the numbers. Let's focus on what really matters." Jiang Wei's words came as a shock to the team. The reaction was mixed: surprise, skepticism, and even some suspicious glances. But what he felt in that moment was something he had never experienced before. The feeling of being in control of his own life, not just of the empire he had built on hollow values. After that meeting, he sat alone, thoughtful. He knew the change would be difficult, that many wouldn't understand his vision. But he also knew he was on the right path. The real transformation wouldn't be just about the business, it would be about himself. The search for a more meaningful life wasn't ending there. It was only the beginning. Jiang Wei was back at his desk, the papers in front of him no longer representing a tangle of urgent, impersonal tasks, but rather a new chance to start over. His mind was calmer than it had ever been, though part of him still hesitated. The decision to change the way he led his company wasn't a small one, and he knew what he was about to do could cost him more than just financial commitments. The resistance would be strong. The morning began like any other, with executives and managers coming in and out of his office, ready for the next meeting about the company's international expansion. But something was different that day. Jiang Wei knew that instead of continuing with the traditional corporate momentum, he needed to change the direction of the conversation. When everyone was seated at the meeting table, he looked at them more attentively than ever before. The room buzzed with the usual energy, chatter about profit targets, aggressive strategies to dominate markets, and promises of more money. But this time, something in his posture shifted. He no longer felt comfortable among those who, like he, once had, were obsessed solely with numbers and competition. "Sir?" one of the directors said, breaking the silence after a few minutes of discussion. "We're confident this new expansion project will bring in significant profits. Let us proceed with our strategies. There's no reason to doubt the numbers." Jiang Wei looked at him, but his decision was already made. He no longer wanted to be just a king on the corporate chessboard, calculating every move based on profit and power. The matter was bigger now. He wanted true change, and it had to start here in this moment. "We're not going down that path anymore," he said, his voice firmer than he expected. "We need to think differently. I no longer want to be at the center of a machine that runs only for money. I want our company to make a difference in the world, to contribute to something bigger than our own greed. Profit will still matter, but how we earn it is going to change. I want every decision we make from now on to consider its impact on people, the environment, and all aspects of society." Silence fell over the room. The executives were stunned. Some glanced at each other, unsure of what to say, while others tried to hide their discomfort. "Sir, are you sure about this?" one of them asked, clearly worried about the future of his own interests. "This isn't how we know how to operate. We're talking about a highly competitive global market, and your new ideas could cost us a lot. We need to be fast, as we've always been." Jiang Wei looked at him and for the first time felt truly at peace with his words. He no longer needed to justify his decisions with cold numbers, not anymore. He was ready to take control of his own life and no longer depend on empty metrics to measure his worth. "I'm sure," he replied, with more conviction than he thought he had. "The world is changing, people are changing. And if we want to stay relevant in the future, We need to be part of that change, not just observe it from a distance. We can't just take any more. We need to give something back. And what we give will be more than just profit. It will be a legacy. With those words, Jiang Wei felt an inexplicable sense of relief, as if a heavy steel cloak had been lifted from his shoulders. There was no longer any doubt in his mind. He knew that was the path to follow, and though he knew the transition wouldn't be easy, he was ready to face the challenges ahead. The following day was filled with conversations across the company. Jiang Wei spent hours speaking with leaders from different departments, explaining his new vision and how he wanted the company to move forward from that moment on. Some were more receptive than others, but there was a growing sense that something was shifting. Even if things wouldn't change overnight, the seed had been planted. But while his journey within the company was beginning to redefine itself, his relationship with Maria was also evolving. She had been the first to challenge him, the voice of reason and humility in his life. He felt that, even though he had taken a significant step in his inner journey, there was still more to learn from her. She was the reflection of everything he needed most: calm amidst chaos, simplicity within life's complexities. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, he went to find her again. Maria was in the break area, sipping coffee while flipping through some papers. When he entered, she looked up, and her calm expression always seemed to be the answer he was looking for. "Maria," he began, a slight hesitation in his voice, "I made a decision today. I've decided to change the direction of the company. We're going to focus more on giving back to the world, not just chasing profit. I want the impact we make to go beyond money, beyond corporate strategy. I want to make a difference." Maria looked at him, her gaze attentive but unsurprised. She already knew he was heading down this path, even if he hadn't realized it yet. She had been one of the first to plant that change in him, without even knowing it. "I knew you'd get there," she said with a soft smile. "You don't need anything more, Jiang Wei. You just need to remember who you really are, and let your actions reflect that." He looked at her with gratitude, but also with something more, a deep sense of connection he had never experienced before. Maria had helped him find something he hadn't even known he was searching for: true inner peace. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was a simple scene, yet full of meaning for Jiang Wei. In recent months, he had begun to see the world in a way he never imagined before. The relentless pursuit of success, wealth, and power seemed more and more distant, and the peace he felt in his heart was something he never knew he had been missing. His company was undergoing a transition. The first changes had already been made. New policies were implemented, emphasizing social and environmental responsibility, and financial goals were adjusted to reflect a balance between profit and positive impact. But what mattered most to Jiang Wei wasn't the numbers. What mattered most was the feeling of being aligned with what he truly believed in. He had found something more valuable than any amount of money: authenticity. He was sitting in his office, watching the sunset, when he heard a soft knock at the door. It was Maria, calm as always. "Sir," she said with a gentle smile. "Is everything all right?" Jiang Wei looked up at her, a quiet smile forming on his face. The transformation he had undergone wouldn't have been possible without her, without her words and her presence. She had helped him see what he couldn't see on his own. She, with her calm and simplicity, had challenged him to look within, to question what truly mattered. And now he felt ready to move forward, not just with the company but with his own life. "Yes, Maria," he replied. "Everything's all right, in a way I never imagined it could be." Maria stepped closer, stopping beside him. They didn't need many words now. She knew he was at peace with his decision, that he was more aligned with himself than he had ever been. But something in his eyes made her reflect on their journey, on how much they had both changed. "I see the difference, Jiang Wei," she said, looking at him with a serene smile. "You've changed. I knew you'd find your way, but now I see that you've found what truly matters." He looked at her for a moment, reflecting on her words. He still didn't have all the answers to life, but something inside him had settled. He now understood that peace didn't come from external things, but from the ability to accept oneself, to connect with what is genuine and true. "I still have a lot to learn, Maria," he said humbly. "But I know that real change starts within us, not in our companies, our bank accounts, or our positions in the world. Change begins when we allow ourselves to be who we are." Maria smiled, a look of understanding on her face. "And that's what makes all the difference, sir." They remained silent for a few moments, watching the view outside. The city now seemed a little less imposing, a little more human. Jiang Wei knew there were still challenges ahead, that life would never be free of hardships. But for the first time, he was ready to face those hardships with a new perspective. Jiang Wei's company was on the right path, with social responsibility as a priority. He knew the changes wouldn't be easy, and that not everyone would understand his vision. But each day he felt more in tune with his own truth. He no longer needed to be the man who sought power at any cost. He now possessed something no one could take away, a new vision of life. In the months that followed, Jiang Wei's company began to be seen in a different light. The decisions focused on responsibility and social impact began to attract more investors and clients who shared the same vision. He also came to be seen as a more human leader, closer to his employees and more willing to listen to those around him. He knew there was still much to be done, but now he felt more prepared for it. And as his professional journey evolved, so did his relationship with Maria. She continued her daily work routine, but something subtle had shifted between them. They no longer saw each other only as CEO and janitor. They were now allies, friends on a shared journey, even if their lives followed different paths. Maria, with her simplicity and wisdom, had been one of the greatest influences on Jiang Wei's transformation, and he would never forget that. One day, as the company was preparing for a new meeting with investors, Jiang Wei called Maria in for a conversation. He knew she had been a big part of his change, and he wanted to express his gratitude in a way that went beyond words. "Maria, I don't know how to thank you enough for everything you've done for me. You showed me a path I never would have found on my own." Maria looked at him with that same calm expression she always carried. "I only helped you see what was already inside you, sir. It's nothing you weren't capable of doing yourself." He smiled, touched by her words. He knew she was right. Now he was able to see, clearly, what truly mattered in his life. Jiang Wei's transformation wasn't a final destination, but a continuous process. He had taken the first steps toward a more authentic and fulfilling life, but he knew that, like the company he led, the journey would never truly end. He would continue to grow, to learn, and to live in a more truthful way, more connected to the world around him. And as he looked to the future, certain that he was now on the right path, he knew that real change didn't come from the constant pursuit of more, but from the acceptance of oneself, from the balance between what he had and what he gave back to the world.